So the time has come that I'm going to be selling my Sony A7 III, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to tell you guys why I no longer use Sony full frame cameras and haven't bought any new ones, and I only really focus on the APS-C system. So yes, as I said in the intro, I am selling my Sony A7 III, and I'm actually going to be using the funds to buy a ZV-E10 Mark II. Now, hold on, and let me explain myself before you go down to the comments and go crazy, because obviously the Sony A7 III is a much more premium camera than the ZV-E10 Mark II. Let me explain myself. First off, I absolutely love this camera. The Sony A7 III is an incredible camera, and I pre-ordered this back in 2018 when it first came out, and I absolutely loved it. I used it for all of my photography and videography work as I started to grow and learn this craft. And I was coming from like a Nikon D5300, which is a very old DSLR camera, so a big upgrade, and I absolutely love this thing. I'm not trying to say this is a bad camera, and I'm not saying that the ZV-E10 Mark II is better, but for my needs, it is. So before I explain why I'm going for the ZV-E10 Mark II, I'm going to explain why I no longer shoot on Sony full-frame cameras. Specifically cameras like the A7 IV, the A7S III, stuff like that. Great cameras, but not for me. And it's primarily around price, right? One thing that this channel is kind of all about is trying to get the highest quality video for the lowest amount of money. I just find that the Sony full-frame cameras since the A7 III just haven't been worth the money. To me personally. So again, like if you have an A7 IV or an A7S III, keep using those cameras. They're fantastic. They're incredible cameras and can produce a fantastic image quality. Keep using those. But for me, who, like this is not my full-time gig anymore. I used to do, a lot of wedding videos and a couple of commercials and stories and interviews and all that kind of stuff. Used to do that stuff all the time. I don't anymore. I'm a full-time youth pastor now and back into my original trade that I was before I got into cameras. And now I just talk about stuff on YouTube. So my needs are probably a little different from yours. For me, I'm coming from a perspective of somebody who has a YouTube channel specifically targeting beginner photographers and videographers, most of whom are looking at the Sony APS-C system. So for me, as basically an educator on these systems, it makes more sense for me to invest in those cameras, as that actually generates me more income, because those are quite popular on this channel, than it is for me to buy an A7 IV or an A7S III. And my problem with the Sony full-frame cameras, especially the new ones, is the price. I'm not saying they're not worth the money, but for me, it's like I would much rather get one of the APS-C cameras that are half the cost and can produce just as good an image with the right lens matching. Obviously, that's the most important part, is going to be your lens over the camera body. You can get incredible images out of this, but the performance to the dollar for the APS-C cameras, I think, is far better than their current full-frame offerings. So for me, it purely is just from a financial perspective. To me, it just makes more sense to go the APS-C route than it is to go the full-frame cameras, because they are half the price. The FX30 that you're watching right now is half the price of its equivalent FX3. The A6700 is almost half the price of an A7 IV, and the APS-C system just has so many lenses available to it. Some incredible lenses that to me are just much more enjoyable to use, and I just enjoy the system. That, paired with the fact that my audience tends to like me talking about these cameras more, it just works out better for me. So yeah, for me personally, my biggest problem at the moment with Sony full-frame cameras is just the price. The offerings from competing companies like Lumix offering their S5 2X, which has, ProRes, 6K, OpenGate, like everything that you could possibly need in a camera that's like $2,000 or less, when Sony's equivalent, I think like the A7 IV realistically, is $2,500 and doesn't quite offer the same amount of stuff. Or even the new Nikon Z6 III, I think it is, offers a ton of amazing features, fantastic image quality, incredibly fast readouts, 6K, all of the bells and whistles for the same amount of money as an A7 IV. So for me, just currently with where I'm at using the APS-C system, I just cannot bring myself to buy a new full-frame camera when the offerings from their APS-C lineup are a much better dollar per performance value to me personally. Now, what I am hoping for is that changes. Hopefully we see an A7 V this year, and if we do, I'm really hoping that they start cutting the costs of their cameras. My biggest fear with that camera is that it's going to hit $2,800 to $3,000 for the camera body on its own, and they're going to keep the A7 IV at $2,500. For me, I was really excited about the A7 IV, but the jump from the A7 III to the A7 IV just wasn't enough for me, personally, especially for the price jump. And when it comes to choosing a camera, it's really important that you ask yourself a couple of questions. First off, what do you need? Not what do you want, what do you need? And for me, most of the time, the Sony APS-C system fulfills everything that I need in a camera. As far as my wants, Of course I want an FX3 or an A7S3 or an A7 IV, the A7C-R. Like, I would love those cameras, but my desire for those cameras is purely based off of what other people say is worth buying rather than what I need personally. And whenever you're making any substantial purchase, which, let's be honest, cameras these days are a pretty substantial purchase, costing in the thousands of dollars, never mind the lenses that you're going to need for full frame cameras, it makes more sense to me personally to go with their APS-C system at a lower price point and the lenses at a lower price point when the performance is still so good out of these cameras. So yes, selling the A7 III for a ZV-E10 Mark II probably doesn't make sense to most people, but for me as a YouTuber who is talking about these cameras, it doesn't make sense for me to keep talking about the A7 III. It's not really content that I make much or content that does particularly well on this channel in particular, whereas the ZV-E10 Mark II is much more within the niche that I've focused this channel on. So for me, it does make sense. For you, it probably doesn't. For most people, it probably doesn't. But for me, it does. So you got to ask yourself, whenever you're buying a new camera, what do you need? What can you afford? And what actually works for you. Don't just buy a camera based off of a YouTuber's recommendation only. You have to ask yourself the question, does it work for me? Because we all deal with GAS, right? Gear acquisition syndrome, this desire to have the best, newest stuff. And the worst thing that you can do is spend thousands of dollars on your camera that you're never going to use just because a YouTuber said so. And I'm saying that about my content as well. Please don't just buy stuff because I say that I like it. You got to do the research, think about it for yourself, and think, is this worth it for me to spend my hard-earned money on? Anyway, I figured I'd just make this video because I am selling this camera. I won't have it anymore to make any videos about, so I figured I'd talk a little bit about why. I hope this has been beneficial to you. This is a little bit of a quick video because I'm actually currently on vacation in Ireland at the moment and testing out the ZV-E10 Mark II as I'm filming this ahead of time. So if you've enjoyed the video, do hit the like button, drop a comment down below, or maybe even subscribe as we continue to build this channel. I appreciate all of you for doing so, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.